Revolution Radio proudly presents, live from the heart of the Blue Ridge, Roanoke, Virginia. It's the Just Bernard Show with host Bernard Alvarez. Join Bernard as he shares topics that reveal the real matrix and empower your human experience, including world liberty, the esoteric, suppressed technologies, spiritual ascension, and human consciousness. Humanity has awakened, and our time has come to realize our full potential. And now, live from the Star City, your host, Bernard Alvarez.
Anyway, let me tell you a little bit about today's show because I'm really excited to be speaking with our guest today. We're going to be talking about her new book, which is being released today, My Life After Death, a memoir from heaven by Eric Medhus, with his mother, Dr. Elisa Medhus. Dr. Elisa Medhus is a doctor until her son's untimely death in 2009 at the age of 20. She was very much a skeptic. She was an atheist, and with her medical background, she counted on hard science, like most people in her field. But the loss that she experienced following Eric's suicide propelled her on a journey that changed her world and healed her grief. With the help of spirit translators, Eric has been able to communicate with his mother and thousands of other people around the globe through her 2 books and her blog, channelingeric.com. So without further ado, let me welcome our guest today, Dr. Elisa Medhus. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. And you said that so beautifully. I couldn't have said it better myself.
Oh, well, thank you for that, Doctor. It's so nice to have you here. This has been, well, geez, we booked the show back in the early summer, and I've been looking forward to this talk. And I'm quite honored that you were able to appear today on the day of the release of your book. So congratulations on that.
Sure. Anything for you, Bernard. Anything.
Oh, thank you. So, Elisa, let me start by asking you. It says that you were a skeptic. You had no connection to the spirit world. Nothing. None of the frou-frou, new agey stuff. Nothing at all. How was it to have that first interaction for you?
Oh, it was amazing. First of all, you're right. I mean, when somebody would talk to me about mediums, my first image would be a gypsy hunched over a crystal ball. And I was raised by 2 atheists. Now, I was more agnostic, or really I didn't even think about life after death at all.
Right.
But after Eric died, of course, it made it even more devastating for me because I didn't believe in life after death, or I didn't know about it. And because I was taught through science in my education that something's real only if you can perceive it with your senses or measure it with an instrument. So I was lost. And then the very first encounter I had happened 3 days after Eric's death. My father called me. And he is not only an atheist, Bernard, he is militantly atheist. Okay. And he called me in a panic and said, Elisa, I was sitting in my chair, reading my newspaper. Then I looked up and there's Eric standing in front of me. And then he said, he goes on to say that Eric turned into his little boy self and crawled up into his lap and said something in Spanish. My father's from Spain. And, if this atheist is actually, and he is a very proud man, he's very proud of his atheism. If he actually admitted in a panic then that he saw a spirit, then gosh, I need to investigate this. And that was the beginning of my journey.
Oh my goodness! Wow, and I can only imagine it must have shook the foundation of your reality for something like this to start happening. Here's something that you thought was so true all of your life, and now you're starting to connect with a disembodied being.
That's right. That's right. And shortly after, well, right after my father's experience, I started researching just as much as I could, especially science, the quantum physics nature of consciousness, near-death experiences, alternate dimensions, controlled studies on mediums, and all sorts of things like that. And during that time, Eric started making his presence known
Yeah.
in not so subtle ways. I mean, he would make airsoft BBs appear at the ceiling over me and then have them drop to the floor. We don't even have airsoft guns. He would turn on water faucets while we watched. He would make unplugged appliances work, just uncanny things. Eventually, I did see him, and that was just so momentous. I remember I was really tired. I went to bed, and I didn't really even have time to lay down entirely when there was Eric jumping from the left side of my bed, the foot of my bed, to the right, back and forth. And my deceased sister Denise was sitting on the left corner looking at him and grinning, like, I know she was thinking, you're acting like a kid, you know. And I couldn't believe it. This couldn't be. That's my son there, and I know I'm awake. So I follow him with my eyes back and forth, trying to soak up and make sense of this surreal experience. And then suddenly Eric turns his face toward me and looks absolutely shocked. And he hollers out, "Mom, you can see me." So he runs into my arms and we hug. And Bernard, the hug felt completely solid, just like our hugs before when he was alive.
Oh, wow.
But it's really interesting. Skeptics can be really tough nuts to crack.
Oh, yeah.
Because, you know, a little time passes and doubts start to creep in. And, you know, I would always hover at that 90% sure mark. Yeah, you know, there's been so much hard evidence, you know, but I'm 99% sure because I didn't really totally want to believe.
Right.
Because if I did and then found out it was all nonsense, then that would be a disaster for me. I mean, that would be losing him again, but forever. So I resisted. So I will tell people out there that this is not the wishful thinking of a grieving mother, because I was the last one who totally wanted to believe in Eric's ongoing existence.
That is absolutely amazing. Wow. And as time went by, what are some of the other ways that he tried to communicate with you?
Well, one of the best was he called me on the telephone. I was working on the blog, and oh God, I had the attention of a gnat embryo. So it was really difficult during the election season when we started getting these robocalls all the time. And
Right.
this one particular call just rang and rang and rang, and I'm like, hurry up, machine, and answer the dang thing. And eventually it did. And there was Eric's voice. "Mom, it's me, Eric, it's me." So I flew to the phone. Didn't get there in time, though. The interesting thing is it was a 12-digit number, and I called it, and it was not a working one. Also, it left no messages on the machine. The message count was 0, so I thought that was odd. Still, it wasn't until I recorded his voice, and I still have that recording and many more, that I totally jumped from 90% sure to 100% sure. And that happened about 4 years after his death. I mean, not that long ago, actually. And all the while I'm writing this blog, but I wasn't totally sure. This blog member calls me to tell me that on one of the recorded sessions that I was having with spirit translator Jamie Butler, she heard 3 voices. So I assured her that it just can't be, because it was just Jamie and me. So, but of course I checked the timestamp she gave me, and yep, 3 voices. One of them definitely Eric's. I mean, I recognize his voice. I mean, any mother recognizes their kid's voice, of course. And he had this special way, for example, of saying breakfast like a little kid, breakfast. That was there. And he had a lot of verbal tics, and that verbal tic of him clearing his throat was there. So I was enthralled. But the scientist in me, you know, I wanted some sort of proof. So I had a sound professional analyze it, and they said, yeah, these are not human voices, for many reasons. One of which was the fact that they left no voice signature. So that was it. 100% sure, never going to turn back.
That's fantastic. That's great. That's great. So, and it's funny. I was just about to ask you, as a skeptic, did you bring in, a specialist, and I guess the voice recording person? Did you? But let me take that a little bit further. Has anyone in the paranormal community tried to contact you, like to do any tests or anything?
Not yet.
Oh,
Not yet. But I did have another expert examine something. Shortly after Eric's death, I was going down the hall to his room. I don't know why I ever wanted to go to that bedroom again, but for some reason, maybe I wanted closure. And my second eldest daughter, Michelle, who was very close to Eric, was following me. And she suddenly got this really strong sense of his presence. Like I say, they were very close, big connection. She grabbed a little digital camera that happened to be on a table near the hallway and started snapping pictures. And one of the pictures shows this bright orb with a long tail, like it's moving. Okay, you don't see that in these so-called orbs that are really not orbs. They're
mm-hmm,
specks of dust or
mm-hmm.
whatever. I had that analyzed by a photography expert, and when he took all the gamma out with filters, it showed that it was its own light source. It was even casting light on nearby structures. So another bit of evidence. I will say this,
Wow.
Bernard, that this happens quite frequently. If you go back and listen to the show, you may actually hear Eric's voice. I remember the first time it happened, it was really funny. We had a great show, great interview, wonderful host. She emailed me, after she went through the entire recording and said, "There's a voice here that was not heard live." So I listened, and yeah, there's Eric saying "minions" really loudly. I mean, you wouldn't miss it if you heard it live. And then, interestingly enough, the medium Jamie Butler immediately said he's calling them minions. So there are a number of these that I have on my YouTube channel, along with other YouTubes. A lot of EVPs, electronic voice phenomena.
Right, right. Oh, that sounds fantastic. I can't wait to hear the archive of this show.
Yeah.
That's great. And so tell me a little bit about the timeline of how this happened. So you started experiencing a little bit of contact with Eric. You saw him, you got to hug him. Uh, when did you actually get to have a conversation with him?
Well, when I kind of exhausted my resources, things to read, the quantum physics books, etc., I had heard, I read this controlled study on mediums. It sounded pretty interesting. And I heard that some parents will resort to using a medium, I guess somewhat out of desperation. So I thought, what have I got to lose?
Mhm.
So I'm going to say this was maybe 3 months after Eric's death, maybe a little bit sooner. I called Jamie Butler, and she didn't know anything except for my name. She didn't know I had a kid that killed himself, much less, I mean, any of the details surrounding that. And that was the first thing she said. Says, "Your son is here, and he says he shot himself." And I listened, and she goes on to describe where he was, that he was sitting at his desk at the time, what kind of gun he used, and the exact description of his clothing, etc. She even was able to capture his personality because he's very playful, very mischievous, and he uses a lot of sailor talk. Jamie has trouble with that sometimes, makes her grimace. But I thought, well, this is interesting, and she gave me so many details that only he and I would know. So I booked another session, and eventually I was finished asking all the personal questions. So I started asking questions that I wanted to put on the blog. The blog was originally designed for me to vent my grief and provide other people in pain a safe, loving, supportive community so they could vent their own.
Mm-hmm.
But then I started adding information that Eric was giving through the mediums, like the nature of death, what the afterlife is like, what the life of a spirit is like, and all sorts of things that have to do with our human experience. And since then, the blog has just exploded. We are just such a tight-knit family,
Oh, that's great.
and they just love Eric, even his cursing, his pranks, and so on. He's just a character.
And So, as for you as an individual, and I asked you this a little bit about coming to embrace the idea that there is life after death, that there is other realities or universes and whatnot. How has this worked for you now that you're going through this? Has your spiritual beliefs changed?
Oh gosh, my whole paradigm has shifted. I understand the reason for the human experience, for one thing, and I understand that yes, there is life after death, obviously, and I've learned that you can continue to have a relationship with those you've quote unquote lost. That they're really just the same. They just
Hmm.
don't happen to have a body, and they don't have the mental and physical illnesses that may have plagued that body in life. So it's just expanded my horizons so beautifully, and I'm just so grateful for the experience. You probably would never think a mother who's lost a child would say that, but there was something beautiful that came from all of this.
Absolutely, and I'm sure that your continued work with Eric is helping a lot of people get a better grasp of well, not only with death, but what's really going on out there.
Yeah, I had a very interesting email today from a medium, Kim Babcock. She saw this young man about Eric's age, and he seemed happy, and just wanted to talk to a psychic, or I don't know if he was channeling loved ones channeled or whatever. But Eric all of a sudden comes in. He'll do that. He'll just come into. He came into one of Lisa Anderson's big events, in front of 800 people. But anyway, he came into Kim's session and told the kid, "Don't kill yourself." And the kid just burst out sobbing. And Eric and he talked and talked and talked. And when he left, he said, "Thank you. You've saved my life." And he came back again, today to tell Kim how his whole spiritual outlook has changed, that he's now on a beautiful spiritual path. And his mother came in later, so grateful for uh, for that experience.
Oh wow.
And I get comments all the time. I had one a few months ago. This gentleman said, "I was going to kill myself today, but after reading this post, I want to live." And he's still around today, very happy.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So it's very, I'm just very grateful for Eric. He made the spiritual contract to come to Earth and suffer with bipolar disease and learning disabilities and Tourette's, so that he could develop the listening skills, the compassion, and other tools that would make him a better spirit guide for us humans.
Yeah.
And I'm just so grateful for what he's doing to help so many people. I'm basically just the secretary. I transcribe sessions and ask him questions, but
I was just going to ask you about that. So you have this is the book that came out today, My Life After Death, a memoir from heaven. This is actually your second book. Your first book is My Son and the Afterlife. Um, how did this come about? Just the idea of putting it into books. Did he say he wanted to have it in a book, or did you just start having so much material that you felt that it needed to be put out?
well, the first book, My Son in the Afterlife, a publishing company just happened on the blog and thought it was a very interesting story. And so that was basically the journey of me going from being a skeptic to a believer, but also in our sessions sharing everything that Eric says about death, the afterlife, spirits, and so on. But Eric wanted to do his own memoir. He wanted to show from his point of view everything from his death. And I'm telling you, Bernard, that was not easy to transcribe because I learned things and graphic details that I wish I had not heard.
Mm,
And so that was a tough part of the book. And I
right.
almost pulled the plug and said, I can't do this. But then it becomes a wonderful, joyous adventure after that. But and then he wanted to talk about his goodbyes to each of us, his crossing over, his visit to his funeral, his crossing over, his life review, his first exploration of heaven, how he learned how his body changed, what his body looked like. what his senses and emotions, how they evolved from being human to being a spirit, what kind of things he does there, what it looks like there, what kind of wildlife they have there. It's just so full of amazing details that by the time you get to the end of the book, the mystery's all but gone. You know what's in store for you, and it's not this scary, foreboding unknown anymore.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Oh, that's wonderful, and what a service he has done to humanity to do this. So, so then it is fair to say that this second book was basically written by him.
Yes.
Wonderful. And the process that you used a medium, Jamie Butler, to did he speak through her, or does she hear what he says?
Oh, she does both. She channels
oh.
and she just translates word for word,
Right.
what he says.
And were you able to see the process live? Were you the one, I guess, transcribing as it happened?
Oh, yes.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, I recorded it. I can't type that fast.
Oh, right.
Sometimes I feel like my fingers are like a whole bunch of chicken drumsticks, trying to clack away on a keyboard. So no, I'd record it and then I would transcribe it later. And it's a lot of work, really is. And I'm very grateful to Jamie for her contribution and for putting up with some of his language. And she took it like a man, though. She was really good about it.
That's great. That's great. So it's fair to say he's kept much of his personality on the other side.
Yes, and I think that's just so refreshing. I didn't want him to lose his Ericness,
Mm-hmm. Even as a spirit guide, he gets to still be Eric.
Exactly. Of course, he has his other selves that are incarnated. He says there is no time there, no linear time.
Mm-hmm.
That linear time is just a human construct, and really all your lives, past, present, and future, are happening all at once. So he has, another self probably in Germany, another, in the year 4000. He has another self, So I think that's quite interesting.
Oh, that's very fascinating. I love that.
It's really hard for people to grasp. He helps to explain it by saying that consider a vertical stack of books, and each one is a life, past, present. They're all happening at the same. That stack, all the books are there at the same time. You just happen to be focusing your intent right now. That one piece of your soul, that is your current self, you're focusing on this one particular book, and the pages in that book are your life. He also says it's kind of like a wagon wheel where your higher consciousness, your main soul, true self, whatever you want to call it, is in the hub of that wagon wheel. And all the spokes are all the different lives that you're listening at once. I mean, that you're leading at the same time. And, when you die, that piece of soul goes back to the hub and another one comes back down the spoke. And then it's turning in the mud. And that track is your timeline.
That's wonderful, Doctor. We have a commercial break coming up. When we return, I want to get into some of these deeper concepts.
And now, back to your host, Bernard Alvarez.
And welcome back to the Just Bernard Show here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. We are having a wonderful discussion today with Dr. Elisa Medhus on her new book that was just released, actually released today, My Life After Death, Memoir from Heaven. You can find more information about Elisa's work at channelingeric.com. That's Eric with a K. I'm looking at the site right now, but there's a lot of information there. My goodness. How long has the blog been up?
Oh, gosh, I'm going to say maybe 5 years.
Oh, okay. Wow. Well, you got 5 years of info there, if not more.
That's right. It's been quite a journey. I'm traveling with the blog members, too, on that same journey. So we learn together. And a lot of the blog members have become really close friends with each other. Some flying clear across the country to meet, and some even coming as far away as Ireland to come to visit other blog members. So it's pretty cool. It's really pretty
Oh,
cool.
that's really nice. That's really, really nice. Um, with that, before we went on the break, and I wanted to delve a little bit deeper into some of the things that Eric has been sharing with us from the other side on his experiences. Now, we were talking a bit about the idea of living all of our lives at once, and forgive me if I'm saying that incorrectly, but what he was saying is that we are one main soul, but we have different aspects that go off to, I guess, experience what they need to experience at different times, whether it be past, present, and future. Is that kind of what he was saying?
That's right. It's like we are a hologram. So if you have um, the little skull, those old, I guess it was in the 70s, the little necklaces of the skull and crossbones or something, kind of a hologram image
Yeah,
on a
yeah.
piece of glass. Say you have that image of yourself. That's your higher consciousness. And in a higher level, that's God source
Right,
also.
right.
So you are whole and part of that. And if you were to break that and look at each little shard, you'd see your image complete in each one. And each of those images is still connected with the original overall one. So your higher self, your true self, is connected to all the other selves, the multiple selves that you have branched out there like little tendrils to other lives.
That's wonderful. It's beautiful. And with that being said, let me ask you: does he say that he's in between lives, or is he just in another a realm is this another life for him now?
Well, yeah, he's speaking through his higher self when he talks to us from his place in the
Uh,
afterlife. It's just another dimension that's actually just on top and swirled into ours. Believe it or not, it's like all the infinite number of dimensions are kind of stacked and then swirled. He says it's really interesting, and but his other selves are still, in various parts of the world at different times, or maybe even different planets.
right, right. Very, very interesting. I actually I just had a discussion with somebody about that yesterday of how we could possibly be living on other planets at the same time. Very very confirming to hear that. Uh, and now, as far as the transition from this life to where he is now, did he share anything about that?
You mean about his death?
Yeah, leaving his body and
Oh,
moving
yeah.
into the higher realms.
Right. He said that it wasn't painful. The First, it was just the lights that were out, and he heard the sound of the ricochet. And then he was right next to his body looking at it, and he thought it was odd. His body just looked like a shell. It didn't look natural.
Uh huh.
He said that even his fingers seemed too long, and he didn't have any emotional attachment to it. He was a little horrified and kind of wanted to get back in because he was, afraid for a little while. But then he noticed that he didn't have that stop mechanism, as he calls it, like when he touched the gun or his hand or his face, his fingers would just slip right through, and so he
Oh,
wasn't accustomed to that either. But it was not painful. He said, death is never painful unless you actually want it to be, unless you, as a spirit, design, hey, I want to experience an agonizing, horrible death. And
oh my
I'm not
goodness.
going to sign up for that one, but I'm sure some spirits do.
Yeah, yeah. And is it like he like most of us here that he had guides waiting for him, or did someone take him, to the next level?
Well, he didn't have any guys at first. He hung around and said his goodbyes to each of us, and that part of the book is just so poignant, heartbreaking, but heartwarming at the same time. I just makes me cry every time I read that part.
I
And then
bet.
he goes to his funeral. He thought that was a little odd because he could hear everybody's thoughts. Spirits, when you lose somebody, they can hear your every thought,
Mm-hmm.
and feel your every emotion. So he thought that should have been overwhelming, all these incoming thoughts, all and emotions all at once, but it wasn't. He was able to process it all very clearly. He also noticed that he was able to see things from so many perspectives. He could, be in front of his sister at the same time as having a perspective above her. So there's a lot of interesting things that he noticed when he had when he was at his funeral. Then the crossing over, we were all going home, and he wanted to go home with us, of course.
Mm.
But all of a sudden he started moving, and he thought it was odd because there were no clues of movement, like the wind in his face or things passing by like trees and whatever to indicate movement. And then he felt like he was at the top of a roller coaster, just dropping over it. And that was the crossing over point. That's what it felt like for him. And he just ended up in a big white room. Then he eventually saw my sister Denise, who died several years before he did. And he had his life review. He had help with guides that helped him forgive himself for doing what he did, and to help him process his life and tie that life to what was happening or what happens in his other lives that he's living simultaneously. So he got a lot out of that.
So it's almost like not only a life review, but kind of like a karma review for all your lives.
That's right. Yeah, he did have his life review, and he said it was weird. He was at a table, and the table was some material he didn't recognize. It didn't seem like it was from Earth. And he was just told by these, I think it was 6 beings, that he was going to go through his life review. And then all of a sudden there was this cyclorama, this 360. He could see 360 degrees, which was another thing he noticed as a spirit that you don't have, that he did not have as a human, being able to see 360 degrees.
Wow.
And he went through everything from before his birth all the way to his final moment on Earth, from so many aspects. If he had a fight with somebody, he would see their perspective, their feeling, their choices, all of their emotions. And he would see when he did wonderful things for people, and he was very, very kind to his friends. He would hear their thoughts and feel their emotions from that experience too. And it all happened in an instant. He called it like a long casual blink. Boom, it was over.
Wow. Very interesting. And when did he realize that he was meant to be a spirit guide? Now, did he have a choice in it?
Oh yeah, there's free will on Earth and there. I mean, there's nobody telling you, okay, now you got to do this, now you got to go back and fix this mistake. No, nothing like that at all. And so he obviously chose that. He didn't really know he was going to be the spirit guide, but he got some hints of it from the lead therapist, Kali, who said, now you're going to have to learn this, so you're going to be a beacon of light for others. Little clues like that. And eventually he did discover that he was to be a spirit guide. And actually he says that being a spirit guide is one of the most common roles. They're kind of like, he says they're kind of like taxi cabs in New York. So very common, very common.
Ah, okay. Now, no wonder many of us here on the planet have more than one spirit guide.
I know. We all need lots of cabs.
Yes,
that's all I can say.
Certainly.
I need all the help. We need all the help we can get sometimes. Huh?
Yeah, we do. We certainly do. And with that being said, Doctor, does he talk about? Does he call heaven heaven, or does he just use that word because that's the word we all know, or is there more than one heaven that he describes?
Well, he calls it home.
Oh, okay.
He doesn't like to call it heaven because then there's religious connotations, and
right.
He doesn't even like to use the word God because that puts all sorts of preconceived notions in people's mind.
Right.
So he usually calls that source energy, but he'll say heaven and God just so that people can understand it if necessary.
Right. And what does he say about heaven? What does it feel like? Since it's not I'm guessing it's not the streets paved with golds with 100,000 angels blowing trumpets.
Yeah, well, if you want it to be that,
Oh,
no,
I guess, yeah, I guess if
you
you
can
do.
create, thought creates reality. That's a very well-known, thing in physics.
Yeah.
So you can create any reality you want, and that's why when an atheist dies, their whole uh, crossing over ends up to be in blackness. They see nothing, and then all of a sudden they realize they're thinking about their dog. Wait, why am I thinking? And then they'll think some more, and eventually they'll ask for help, and that raises their vibrational frequency enough that other spirits can help orient them.
Mm.
But no, he said that the colors are just so brilliant, and there are colors, just infinite number of colors we've never seen on Earth before, and they seem to move and be alive. The wildlife, the trees, everything is just alive. Basically, the
Mm-hmm.
bark moves, the bark speaks on the trees. It's interesting. He goes into quite a bit of detail. He also talks about the sky, how it's different. It seems like it's so far removed. It doesn't seem like it's well, it's hard for him to describe, but it just doesn't seem like it's just a sky that meets at the horizon and that's it.
Right, right.
And well, yeah, he says it even has sort of a texture to it. It's fascinating. Now, about God, he asked to meet God, which is Source,
Mm-hmm.
what you call Source. When he was having trouble, looking at us, his family, still in such pain, because it was like an atom bomb went off in our house. It just changed us all, just forever. And then God appeared to him, and he said that God will appear to you however you want him to.
Mm.
If you want, and it's not a gender, it's not a he or she.
Right.
If you want it to appear like a telephone booth, it'll come as a telephone booth. And he said it came to him more as textured air, he called it. Anyway, he describes it a lot better than I'm doing right now because I can't remember. But he said that he learned that God is all there is. Everything is energy. Everything, even our thoughts and emotions, even love is a form of energy. Matter is energy that Einstein referred to as frozen light.
Mm-hmm.
So everything is energy. Everything is, and God is all that energy, um, all the infinite amount of energy, basically.
Yeah. The source of all energy, and all of the energy.
Exactly, exactly.
Very interesting. Now, has he is is his work basically individual to individual, or does he have a message for humanity that he wants to share?
Well, he focuses, really talks about anything that to anyone who will listen.
Okay.
But he really likes to stress the fact that we are emotional beings, that we are actually made of emotions. That's, obviously, like I said, an energy. And so we need to learn how to feel first and think second. Humans, with their logical mind, have have evolved to think a thought, and then that produces an emotion, and that emotion triggers some sort of reaction or choice. Where when it really should be the opposite, we should feel first, be aware of what you're feeling, and then let that produce a thought, and let the thought create the reaction or choice. So he stresses that. Now, he also stresses emotional honesty, that in order to be aware of your feelings, of course, you have to be emotionally honest with yourself. Very, very important. And he stresses the importance of being emotionally honest with others. And that takes vulnerability. And he says vulnerability gets a bad rap amongst us humans because it's given from a position of weakness, but
Right.
it's not. It's very, very powerful to be open and vulnerable with yourself and others. So I think those are the main things he stresses, beside the fact that, when you quote unquote lose someone, you really don't lose them, and that you can continue to have a relationship with your loved ones after they pass on.
Absolutely, and I think that's a very strong message for people, and it's it's strange that in today's world, if we look at the history of mankind, that maybe up until a couple thousand years ago or even less, depending on the cultures, most cultures did maintain a relationship with those who passed, and we kind of like are scared of that.
You're absolutely right, and I think material science did a lot of harm as far as inhibiting our spirituality. The ancient mystics were farther along than we are now as far as that's concerned. And so
Yes.
material science, okay, it's not real because you can't see it or smell it or touch it or whatever. And then organized religion also hampered our spiritual growth as well. But now science is going to be our savior. Science is proving things that Eric has confirmed, like the fact that the soul does exist and that it's made of tiny little particles called neutrinos, that it's attached to each cell in the hollow space of microtubules, these little structures that are inside, that are intercellular, and just the existence of parallel dimensions and so on. So we're getting there. It reminds me of this quote from Arthur Schopenhauer. He says that truth goes through three phases. First, it's ridiculed, and I get a lot of that. Then it's scorned, got a lot of that too. But eventually it's accepted as self-evident, and I think spirituality is just going through those phases. Hopefully we'll get to the end point soon, but those are the same phases that we had to go through when we were evolving from thinking the earth was flat to the earth is round. And I think it's interesting that people like me, like my prior self, really didn't believe in the afterlife because we can't see spirits. But if you think about it, we can't see radio waves.
That's
Yeah,
right.
we know they exist.
Yeah.
So just because we can't see it or perceive it with our senses does not mean it doesn't exist.
Very true, and we need to embrace that all-encompassing awareness and consciousness again. I feel that, well, like you said, we're getting there. We're getting there.
You're so right on that, Bernard. You touched upon something really interesting, because if we do embrace that total consciousness, then we'll realize that we're all part of a collective.
Yeah.
And when you harm another, you only harm yourself.
Yes, exactly, exactly, and I love that how Eric describes, the God energy and the source energy and whatnot. If we can embrace the idea that, again, that all-encompassing consciousness, that we are connected, that we're harming ourselves by harming others, we will find that divinity in all things. I believe that for me, even the ugliest act, or even the most evil person in the world, or what people call evil, I believe is connected to the positive of source somehow.
That's
There's
right.
I believe there's only bad decisions.
Well, Eric would say that there's really no wrong or right at all. Everything's a lesson.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
And there's no negative or positive. There is evil. But it's still all part of the God source. It's part of the light. It's just a dimmer part of the spectrum of that light.
Yes.
So, but all of us are basically sentient energy that's self-aware. That's what we are, and if you want to use it in terms of physics.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I hate to say that we're running out of time, and I'd like to ask you a question. What, from all of this experience that you've gone through, from being a skeptic to now literally having a new relationship with your son on the other side, what is it that you can share with everybody that's listening about what you've learned?
Well, I think the biggest thing I've learned is the obvious, that there is life after death, but that we need to continue to have a relationship with our loved one. Here's a simple game you can, form of communication you can use that I call the hand game. Designate one hand as yes and the other as no. It doesn't make any difference which. And put them palms up, apart, and ask your loved one a yes or no question. Then wait and see if you get a different sensation on one palm. Like it might feel like they're blowing on your palm, or a temperature change, a pressure change, numbness, tingling, any sort of change. And that's your answer. If you don't get anything, you can go ahead and say, hey, make it stronger, make it stronger, make it stronger until you're satisfied that you have your answer.
Ah, I like that. I'm gonna have to try that. Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, so the book is coming out today, or it is out today. Where can people find this book, My Life After Death?
I have all the icons for Barnes and Nobles and Amazon and all these other places on my website on the blog, Channeling Eric. But of course, Amazon, Barnes and
Okay.
Nobles, all the brick and mortar stores, anywhere any place that books are sold.
Wonderful. Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. It was such a pleasure talking to you. And
Yeah, it was
Eric,
fun.
Eric, thank you for the work you're doing. If you're listening, it really means a lot to me that you're reaching out to us here. We need it. Thank you. And thank you so much. Everybody, I just wanted to let you know that next week I will be having to take the day off. So I want to let you know Terry Joyce will be filling in for me on the Just Bernard show here at 2 p.m. Eastern Time next Tuesday. The following week, which is great, about very close to what we're talking about here, we have Graham Nichols coming on talking about out of body experiences. And I guess that's when you're still alive and you are leaving. Anyway, we love you all very, very much. I'll see you guys in 2 weeks. Have a wonderful, wonderful week. Bye bye. We love you.